A quiet evening at the office was supposed to be just another ordinary putt. When he walked toward me, everything I thought I knew about my life changed in an instant. If you'd asked me 6 months ago where I saw me career heading, I'd have given the usual answer: steady job, slow but sure promotions, and maybe, if I was lucky, a window office one day. But that was before I met Adrian, my boss. And with him, nothing was ever simple. It was enough. Those gray, cold mornings, when even the strongest coffee couldn't chase away fatigue. The office felt heavy with routine, thickened, that makes every day blur into the next. Titchy. I pushed through the revolving doors wrapped in my coat, barely lifting me head as I made my way to the. Then I saw him, Adrian Studby, the marble reception counter, leaning, somehow turning the dull lobby into something cinematic. In the few months since I joined TFC, I'd learned one thing quickly. Adrian wasn't like other executives. He was sharp, confident, impossible tenure. He had that rare presence, fecund, that could charm or intimidate with same effortless smile. And when he spoke, it felt like the rest of the world faded away. That morning, Kia's eyes met mine, and a sudden jolt ran through me, sharper than cold outside. "Good morning, Hesset." His tone smooth yet serious. Nodded politely, the way I always did, and reached for the elevator button. His voice came again. "Got there's something I'd like to discuss." There was a faint smile on his face, but his eyes, they were focused, intent, as if every word he spoke had purpose. I followed him to a quiet corner of the lobby, where the early light spilled through tall windows, casting long golden shadows across the floor. A strange tension hung in the air, something unspoken, but I told myself it was nothing. It was probably just another task or project, I told myself. Then his voice dropped low and calm. "I need someone who can keep a secret, Hesset. Someone I can trust." Samia outside, the usual office noise. He blinked, trying to make sense of his. This wasn't a strategy meeting. This wasn't business as usual. There was nothing different in his tone. Something personal. It sent a strange unease through me. Acquiescent tension I couldn't name. He looked at him directly in the eyes, waiting. "Of course," I said, maybe too quickly. My heart raced. A mix of curiosity and hesitation tangling inside me. "You can't trust me." He smiled then, but it wasn't the same smile he used in meetings. It was subtle, unreadable, like he was testing me, watching my every reaction. "I had a feeling about you," he said softly. And just like that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, with a dozen questions swirling in me head. The rest of the morning passed in a his words lingered like a shadow you couldn't shake. I tried to focus on work, convincing myself it was nothing. Probably just a confidential assignment. By lunchtime, I'd almost managed to believe it. But when I returned to my desk, a new email from Adrian was waiting in my inbox. No subject line, just one sentence. "Cafe Cross, the street, after work." My pulse quickened. It didn't feel like a tea. Not this time. Whatever this was, it was only just beginning. Still, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't say no. I closed the email and tried not to overthink it. But the anticipation kept building as the hours dragged by. Each minute felt slower than the last. At exactly 5 o'clock, I grabbed my coat and left the office. The cafe was an old-fashioned place, dim lights, warm wooden walls, and a quiet charm that made it feel miles away from the glass and steel of our workplace. Ian. I saw him. The moment I walked in. Adrien was seated at a small table in the corner, coffee in hand, eyes fixed on the street outside. For a moment, I just stood there, watching him. He looked calm, completely at ease, like he belonged to another world. When he noticed me, his expression softened. He motioned toward the chair across from him, and I sat down feeling slightly off place. Like I'd stepped into a scene I wasn't meant to be part of. He took a slow sip of coffee, gaze steady, unreadable. I wanted to talk outside the office, he said, finally. Some things are better kept separate. I nodded, unsure of how to respond. There was a weight to Histon, something that told me this wasn't just about work. Before I could ask anything, he leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a quieter, more deliberate tone. There's something I'm working on, he said. It's unconventional, but I need someone I can trust. Hadn't explain. He didn't have to. The way he looked at me, patient, watchful, told me this was about more than a rush of curiosity mixed with something I couldn't quite define. My pulse quickened, but I managed a small nod, not trusting my voice to stay steady. He smiled, brief, but genuine. Kind-off smile that made you feel seen. Good, he said softly, leaning back. I had a feeling you'd understand. He took another sip of coffee, his eyes still fixed on me. Then, almost casually, though his tone carried something deeper, he asked, "Tell me truthfully, why did you really take this job?" I hesitated, caught off guard. My answer came slowly. I guess I wanted a challenge, I said. Something that would push me, make me better. He nodded like he knew exactly what he meant. For a few moments, we sat in silence. Not awkward, just charged. Full of something unspoken. It felt alive, like the air itself, holding its breath. Why did you take this job? I blinked, caught off guard. It wasn't the kind of question you'd expect from your boss, especially one as private as Adrien. He usually kept his lips sealed behind polished profession, but the way he asked it made me want tones. For a moment it felt like I was standing on the edge of something I didn't quite understand yet. He finally spoke again. His voice was softer, thoughtful. Sometimes we have to take risks to get what we want. His eyes locked on mine. To push past what we think we're capable of. I wasn't entirely sure what he meant, but the words stayed with me, lingering in the quiet between us. There was something raw in the way he said it. A hint of vulnerability he didn't usually show. As we sat there, the noise of Thique faded away, and for a fleeting minute, it felt like we were both reaching for something more, something neither of us could name. Eventually, he glanced at his watch, a faint frown crossing his face. I have to go, he said, his tone carrying a trace of but I want you to think about what we talked about trust. Hested placed a few bills on the table, and gave me one last look. "See you tomorrow," he said quietly, then turned and disappeared into the evening. I stayed there for a while, staring at the empty seat across from. Everything he'd said kept echoing in me mind. Good. It felt like I was standing on the edge of something real, something that could change everything. As I walked home that night, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. It was only the beginning. The next morning, I could barely focus. Adrienne's words kept looping in my head. Sometimes we have to take risks. Target what we want, Tet. There was something unspoken in that line, almost like an invitation to step beyond the familiar. By the time I reached the office, my nerves were buzzing, my thoughts spinning in circles. I wasn't sure if I'd even acknowledge what happened at the cafe. Hours passed, nothing. Adrien moved through the office like Hellways did, focused, efficient, in and out of meetings. He barely looked my way. Part of me felt relief, but another part, the quieter own, ached with disappointment. Maybe I'd imagined the connection. At lunch, I decided to clear my head with a walk around the block. The cold air helped just a little, but as I was about to step back inside, a message flashed across the screen. Adrienne conference room. Now. My heart skipped. I hurried back inside, weaving between desks and coworkers, my pulse growing louder with every step. Didn't know what I was walking into, but something told me this was the moment everything would change. When I entered the conference room, I was surprised to find him alone. Adrien stood by the large window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the city skyline. He didn't turn when I walked in. This silence stretched, tense, fragile, almost alive. "Close the door," he said finally, his voice low and heavy with something I couldn't quite name. Iditus, he asked. Click. The soft click of the door hold behind me, hanging in the air like a held breath. For a moment, he stayed quiet. Then he turned to face me. His expression was unreadable. "You're probably wondering why I asked you here," he began, eyes locked on mine. "It's not easy for me to trust people, especially in this industry. But I've been watching you since the day you started. There's something that tells me you can handle what I'm about to ask." He took a slow step closer. The space between each shrank, the air thickening with quiet tension. "I have a project," he said, his tone dropping almost to a whisper. "It requires discretion and someone willing to take risks. Risks that don't exactly fall under the usual job description." My throat tightened, but I managed to nod. "I can handle it," I said softly. "Where it is." He studied me carefully, his gaze up and searching. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Put. Once you're in, there's no backing out. This isn't just work, hep-housed. It's personal." His words hung between us, heavy and charged. Air felt electric, like something reversal had just begun. My pulse quickened. But I didn't look away. "I'm sure," I said for a moment. He just watched me, as if weighing my answer, measuring whether I truly understood what I was agreeing to. Then he stepped back, a faint, almost reluctant smile tugging at his lips. "Good," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving mine. "Meet me tonight After hours, I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. Thwit, in his tone, told me everything. Wha. Whatever this was, it mattered. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I went through the motions, but my mind kept circling back to him, to that promise, to the unknown, waiting beyond the clock striking 6. Time dragged, each minute, then the last, pulling me closer to something I couldn't yet name. When the office finally emptied, I made my way toward his office. The quiet halls echoed with the soft hum of the lights and the steady pounding of me own heartbeat. Adrian was already there. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable. He motioned toward the door, and I closed it behind me. Dim light inside cast soft shadows across his face, carving sharp edges into his calm composure. "Let's go," he said, his voice low and deliberate. Without another word, he led me down Thekkerrider, out of the building, and into a sleek black car waiting at the curb. We drove in silence. City lights flickered past the windows, painting fleeting reflections across his face, cold, warm, then gone again. The streets grew quieter, more unfamiliar. Eventually, the car slowed in front of a small hidden restaurant, never noticed before. He stepped out first, expecting me to follow. Inside, the restaurant was dimly lit and nearly empty. Soft jazz played somewhere in the background, curling through the air like smoke. He guided me to a private booth tucked in the back, far from the few scattered patrons. Ordered drinks without looking at the menu. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt alive, thick, humming with something that words couldn't quite reach. Finally, Adrian leaned forward. "I need someone I can trust for this," he said, his tone low but steady. "Beautits, more than trust. I need someone fully committed, someone who can keep this separate, away from work, from everything else." I swallowed hard. His words carried weight, and behind them, for the first time, I caught a glimpse of something raw in his eyes, something human, something vulnerable. My pulse roared in my ears. The silence between us stretched, thick, heavy, charged with things neither of us dared to say. "I understand," I said quietly. "I can do that." His gaze softened just slightly, and he gave a small nod. "Good," he said. "Then let's drink to it." He raised his glass. I met it with mine, and the soft clink of glass seemed to tozzle something between us. As we drank, something shifted. The sharp tension from earlier melted into a quieter current, deeper, more personal. I could feel his eyes on me, steady, searching, like he was waiting for a signal I didn't realize I was giving. When we finally stepped outside, the night air hit like a wave, crisp, cool, and sobering after the warmth inside. Wes stood there in silence, the city lights casting long shadows across his face. Then, without a word, he reached out. His hand brushed against mine, a fleeting touch, but enough to send a jolt through me. I caught my breath. He didn't move closer. He didn't speak. He just looked at me, gaze intense, unflinching, as if could see straight through me. In thought moment, I knew we'd crossed the line. Nothing would be the same after this. We stayed there, suspended in the stillness of everything unspoken. Then he turned, eyes flicking toward the street. "Come with me," he said quietly. I followed. We walked through the quiet streets, our footsteps echoing softly against the pavement. The city felt differentissimo, slower, heavier, as if it knew what was unfolding. Eventually, we stopped at a small bar tucked into a narrow alley. It was nearly empty, just the bartender, who greeted Adrienne with a knowing nod. We took a seat in the corner booth, shadows flickering gently across his face. We talked about work, about life, about choices and timing. On the surface, it was casual, easy, but beneath it the tension hummed like a wire, pulled too tight at one point. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing lightly against mine. Tint was subtle, almost nothing, but the touch sent a shiver through me. I looked opened in his eyes. I saw it. Something Gungard, something raw. A flicker of vulnerability that caught me completely offered. He didn't pull away. He didn't look away. He just let the contact linger, quiet, deliberate, wordless. And in that small, charged moment, something between us finally shifted. Something that had been building for far too long. Then, just as gently, he withdrew his chin. A faint smile curved his lips. Wes hold head back, he murmured, his voice softer now, almost hesitant. We walked in silence again. When we reached my building, he stopped. That some intense gaze met mine, calm, but filled with unspoken meaning. Think about what we discussed, he said quietly. Dummy, and tell me if you're ready to take this on. All of it. I nodded, unable to find my voice. He held my gaze for a moment longer, then turned and walked away, his figure fading into the glow of the city lights until he was gone. I stood there long after, me thoughts racing, my heart still pounding. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every moment replayed in my mind. Every glance, every touch, every word, all of it lingered in the air, heavy with meaning, quiet, but full of promise. I knew I'd crossed a line, one that couldn't be uncrossed, one that would change everything. But even with the risk and the uncertainty pressing down in me, I couldn't shake the feeling that Ty was ready to face whatever waited beyond that invisible boundary between us. As the first light of dawn slipped through my window, I made my decision. The days that followed carried a tension I couldn't ignore. Something between Julian Easton and me had shifted. Something that went far beyond work. Every look, every exchange, every pause in conversation felt charged. Like there was more happening beneath the surface, waiting to break free. And I knew it wasn't a matter of time before it did. I hadn't responded to his invitation. Part of me wanted to follow him into whatever. This was but another part hesitated, because this wasn't just about crossing a professional line. It was about him. Julian had a presence, aquiote power, that filled every room, every word he spoke. And the way his attention lingered on me, it unsettled him in a way nothing else ever had. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about him. He consumed my thoughts. Each interaction left me more caught up in the invisible pull between us. A thread he seemed to draw tighter with every passing day. Nights were the hardest. When everything fell silent, I found myself replaying that moment. The warmth of his hand brushing mine, the low deliberate tone of his voice when he spoke to me about the project he thoughted me. Then about a week later, heckled me into his office again. cat. There was something different about him this time. His calm demeanor carried aquiote intensity, something simmering just beneath the surface. He didn't look up right away when I entered. But the moment our eyes met, the air shifted, charged alive like a spark had been struck between us. Close the door, hissed voice, steady, but low. I did as he said. The soft click behind me sounded final, somehow, like a line being drawn. The room suddenly felt smaller, heavier. Then he looked up, eyes locked on mine, unwavering. He leaned back, in his chair, fingers tapping lightly against the desk, a faint smirk curving at the corner of his toe. I think, he said slowly, it's time we take this a little further. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning neither of us dared to name. My throat tightened. I couldn't find my voice right away, but he didn't seem to need one. He stood slow and deliberate and walked around the desk until he was standing just inches away from me. The space between us seemed to dissolve, every breath charged with something he couldn't quite define. Do you trust him? He asked quietly. His tone was soft, careful, like he was testing the edge of something fragile. I sweltered. Yes, I whispered. I trust you. He nodded slow and thoughtful, as if my answer carried more weight than I could understand. The world outside the office fell away. It was just us, suspended in that quiet electric stillness. Then, gently he reached out. His fingers brushed against me hair, tucking it behind my ear in a motion so subtle it barely existed, and yet, it changed everything. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. His eyes searched mine, steady and unguarded. You know, he said softly, I've never been good at holding back. His words sank into the silence like a promise or a warning. The air between us was heavy, alive. Quote, every heartbeat felt like an answer to a question neither of us had asked out loud. And in that instant, I knew we'd stepped into something we couldn't undo. No words, no explanations, just the quiet, undeniable pull of two people who had crossed a line they could never retreat from. The world outside continued as if nothing had changed. But for us, everything had. As our bodies moved closer, the air between us changed, warm, electric, alive. His hand brushed through my hair, pulling me gently toward him. I could hear his breathing quicken, and something inside me began to unravel. I had never felt this alive before. So vulnerable, yet somehow completely safe. I paused, my forehead resting against this. Are you sure about this? He whispered, my voice trembling. He didn't answer right away. His eyes met mine, deep and searching, as if he was trying to find something he'd lost a long time ago. Then, without a word, he leaned in again. The space between us disappeared. The world faded away. In that moment, nothing else existed. It wasn't something either of us could control anymore. The line we'd crossed had changed everything. And even though I knew the risks, the uncertainty, I also knew I was ready. Ready to see where this would lead. When the first light of dawn slipped through my window, my mind was made up. The days that followed carried a quiet tension, a shift I couldn't ignore. Something had changed between Adrian and them, something deeper than work, strong earthen logic. Every glance, every conversation, felt heavier, charged with meaning. We both pretended not to notice, but it was there, growing, waiting, and I knew sooner or later it would become impossible to hide. Part of me wanted to dive headfirst into whatever had planned, but another part held back. This wasn't just about crossing a professional line. It was about everything else that came with it. His presence carried a quiet authority that drew me in, stirred something unfamiliar deep inside. No matter how hard I tried, thoughts of him consumed me. Every conversation, every glance left me tangled in something I couldn't escape. There was a softness in his eyes I hadn't seen before, something unguarded. He reached out, his hand brushing lightly against my arm. And my heart skipped at the touch. "We don't have to let it, he said, his voice low and calm, laced with hope. "Can figure this out, but only if we're honest with each other and with ourselves." I looked at him, my thoughts spinning. He made it sound simple, like it was just a choice, like we could simply decide to make it work. But nothing about this was simple. Nothing ever was. Pete. He dropped his hand and stepped back. The space between us felt like both a relief and a loss, and he wasn't sure which one hurt more. "Then tell me you don't feel it," he said quietly. "Tell me you don't want this as much as I do." But I couldn't. The words wouldn't come because deep down I did want it. I wanted him, but wanting something didn't make it right. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice barely holding steady. I can't." He nodded slowly, the light in his eyes dimming, replaced by quiet resignation. "I guess that's your answer, then." Silence filled the room, heavy, endless. The kind that felt like it could last forever. Neither of us knew what to say. The tension that had been building between us had finally broken, and all that remained was the stillness after the storm. "I should go," I said softly. "I need some time to think." He didn't try to stop me, didn't say a single word. He just stood there watching as I gathered my things and made my way toward the door. With every step, my heart grew heavier, burdened by everything we had just shared. It felt like I was leaving a part of myself, but I couldn't stay. Not now. Not when everything between us felt so certain, so fragile. What happened had left a mark, deep, undeniable, something neither of us could ignore or forget. It changed us, changed the way we saw each other, and maybe even ourselves. I paused at the doorway, the weight of it pressing hard against my chest. Walking away wouldn't erase what had happened. I knew that the distance between us might grow, but something would always linger, unspoken, invisible, yet impossible to deny. I stepped outside, my pulse racing, feeling the weight of everything we just been through. Door closed softly behind me. The silence that followed felt almost alive, as if memory of that moment would follow no matter how far I went.